Damon, thank you for finding some time to join me all the way from the States. Good morning from me. Good afternoon to you.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. How are you, Tanya? It's good to see you.
I'm great, and it's good to see you. Damon Colaluca.
Right. Very
Yes.
good.
So let's start with you introducing who you are. You've worked in the not-for-profit space for many years, but you're now consulting.
Sure.
We are in the same community. We're both certified Reinvention practitioners. So maybe start off by just a little bit of an intro would be fantastic.
Absolutely. My name is Damon Colaluca. I'm the principal at Colaluca Associates, and we're a boutique consulting firm that helps nonprofits specifically build their change capacity and kind of thrive in an uncertain future. So that's what we do. My career started 34 years ago in the nonprofit sector, and I served for the YMCA of the USA for all of that time in different assignments across the country. I ended with I was toward the end of my career, I was a CEO for several years of a medium-sized association, and what I found was, at the end of my my Y career, what I was looking at is, in looking backward, I noticed that every assignment I had had some change aspect to it. I came in and we needed to change something. Either something was on fire and we had to change it, or we just weren't aligned and we needed to right the ship. And so in looking back at that, I saw that that's when I was most excited. That's when I feel like I did my best work. So in looking for what am I going to do next, I found Reinvention, and I found a language I found a language of things that I was doing for the last 30 years, but I didn't have words for. And so I found language and framework and tools and kind of a mindset. And that's where you and I met, and how.
I'm just going to hold this up for people who are maybe new to Reinvention. It's a little thing, but it's quite nice that our names are in this book. So
that's right.
On Reinvention, it's pretty nice for our little contribution, very little.
That's right.
to Nadia's book.
So that's where I believe that at least in the States, the fabric of our society is fraying at just a phenomenal rate, and the only thing keeping it together is the nonprofits. The government has proven inept at thinking big enough and being able to act, and the for-profit sector is helpful in some places and not in others. And so the nonprofit sector is the thing that holds everything together. So my idea is we just need to make them better. They're not effective. They're not up for the challenge of the coming decade, the coming century. And I truly believe that's because, nonprofits were built just like all other companies during a time of great stability and pretty steady growth. And that's not going to be the next era. And so the ability to, those tools no longer work. We need new tools, new mindsets, new ideas. So that's why I founded my little consultancy, to see if I can't make a little dent.
Yeah, and so let's just let everyone know. I mean, you were with the YMCA for a long time, but you had C-suite roles. You had titles that vice president, president, CEO. So you working right to the point with. So just people realize with boards, and so you've really seen the culture in a well-regarded legacy organization right through to the board. So And then similar to me, you felt like there's always a better way to do things. We're looking at change. We're trying to see how we can help organisations. And you've probably similar to me that you've had a lens through what we might call legacy organisations that have done well in the past and they've relied on their success or how they define success. And then, but they struggle with this idea of, well, when that toolkit that they're not even very conscious of what the toolkit is they've been using isn't working for them, they struggle with how to not just adapt, but adapt fast enough. So maybe I think it'd be great to hear from people because you are an expert in the not-for-profit sector or whatever language people like to use. Sure. Just maybe a couple of bullet points around when we think even pre-COVID, before people realized something was going to come at them. What were your observations about why people were struggling with change? How conscious were they that there was change, or was it in the moment that there was just an immediate problem? What were some of your observations about the not-for-profit sector and about maybe where they were thriving, but where they definitely weren't?
Right. I think when you talk about the nonprofit sector, there are plenty of organizations that are thriving, but it's not evenly distributed, right? So there are parts, where definitely some of what I'm saying it will be completely accurate, and then other parts it won't be. But in my experience, change or disruptions would happen as a surprise. So they were never anticipated. It's always a surprise, and change was looked at, we have to change because this thing happened. So it was always something being done to the organization, and the organizations over the last 50 years to 100 years have developed their structures to operate on very thin margins, on very much a firefighter mentality of they're so busy doing the work that there are no reserves, there are no resources. So when a disruption happens, they don't have a lot of time to think about things. So it's much more of a knee-jerk reaction of how do we get out of this right now, right? So there's not much thought of, can we parlay a solution for today that's really going to set us up for success tomorrow? And so that's where that's I think going into the pandemic, that was a normal scene in a boardroom. Yep. Change is something to go through, and then be over with, right? It was just like, we're going to keep our heads down and come out on the other side, and continue doing whatever we were doing, right? Because that's what the strategic plan said, or that's what the budget said, which was, again, something that was done, a year to 3 years prior with no connection to what reality is today. Yeah.
Yep. So I just want to recap some of this because I think, I just ran a workshop for a not-for-profit in the arts and culture space. And so we did a scoping workshop just to get an understanding of the problem space. Let's spend some time understanding the problem. Sure. And they because they'd done pre-conversations, it was so they are now very clear, and it was very clear that they just struggle to get the day-to-day stuff done, the stuff that they've been doing for years, that they do all the time, and they don't have any airtime for anything else. And so when I had them complete actually the assessment we use in the in the Reinvention, the Titanic syndrome, what came up for them is that their weakest area was anticipating change, and they don't have people, resource, headspace. Right. And so we haven't yet rushed to how will we solve for that? Because the first thing is, let's identify the problem and make sure we're all aligned. So what I'm just saying is I can really resonate, even just with my engagement recently with a well-regarded, highly seen as having a great legacy, but then they're worried that they're not getting to do other things, and they don't even know how, and they don't know who in the team would do that because they struggle to just do the simple things. So people get surprised, which we shouldn't be surprised because we know change happens. Right. But also that idea of we set a plan and we want to hold on to the plan. So now we're going to make the plan work no matter whether we've seen something either has changed or is coming at us. That's what I hear you're talking about. But Absolutely. The culture or our DNA and our body gets rewarded over the years for being great at firefighting. So now we're not so good at or we don't think it's, we don't reward those that say, can we think 10 steps ahead and what might happen? You know, we don't get those right conversations rewarded in organizations, or rewarded for going slower rather than being the firefighter that rescues someone. Right.
Well, there's definitely in the nonprofit sector, and I'm not saying everyone, but the need to help people drives kind of a hero mentality of we're going to come in and save, and that's in my career I've seen it as kind of a colonialist mentality sometimes.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's just needs to be examined, and but I think that's that drive and that DNA. The other thing is just the sunk cost fallacy of we spent 9 months and 15 grand on that strategic plan. We're doing it, right? It's not, it's like I can't abandon it. That was a lot of work. Right?
Yeah, and I think because this is what I even see working. I work with corporates, but even they with big budgets have the same thing. And sometimes I feel like because they have big budgets, it gets easy not to have the hard conversations. But clearly, it doesn't matter how big your budget is. And so it's really the point is people aren't having those conversations at the start of if this happens, what will be our response? Are we okay with stopping, accelerating, pivoting? Because like you say, people have set a plan with only one way of operating. Sunk cost means, well, we're already 80% there, but why would you keep going if it's potentially there's a much faster, better option to the side, but you're not seeing it because you're so focused on the plan that you've all committed to. Yeah.
Right. Well, and that's where all the incentive structure is based on that, right? So it takes the folks at the top to say, time out. We're not going to, we're going to change this up. We're going to try something new, and we're going to reward experimentation, or we're going to reward, something other than hitting these predetermined marks that we made up 3 years ago.
Yeah, right? Or because we thought we were good decision makers, but maybe we weren't until we, yeah absolutely.
Well, there's I'm sorry. The other thing I see is that there is, and I don't know if this is in the corporate sector too, but there's an over estimation of execution in a plan, where if a plan doesn't go well, the first thing we do is we look at it wasn't executed right. Somebody must be at fault. It was poorly executed. Instead of maybe we just that was a horrible plan or a bad strategy, or we picked the wrong objectives. But I think that's harder work, right? That's introspection. That's, oh my God, we could be completely off on everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's easier to say it's Jill in accounting that.
No, absolutely. And I think because I see this with corporates moving into digital execution and working with not-for-profits, I see this, people who have gone from a print brochure, which is a very simple process, and it's very clear when you've achieved it, to a digital execution has a lot more steps. And those that are making the decision of it at a senior level have not been in digital and don't realize that. Then they put their team who have never been in digital into an execution format, and they do not understand the granularity and the steps that are required, but also how to make it more efficient because they've never done it. So to your point, then everybody then basically goes, well, digital doesn't work, or it's too slow. Right. It's like, that's not, so you jump to your takeout from it, which is potentially not right because you didn't have the experts to guide you, as well as to hear them at the start. I don't know how many times I've said to people, it's going to be more worth it, but it's a real change. It's harder. There's more little steps, and each one matters, because if you don't get that right, it all builds on each other. So I think okay. So I'm just processing what you said, because I think something you and I shared before we jumped onto camera was also when we talked about some of the challenges for not-for-profits even before COVID, was this reliance on only a couple of income streams. So I'd love you just to touch on that as well, because I think that's important for us to talk about when we talk about change, because we want to talk about how organizations need to set themselves up for greater success going forward.
Sure. Well, there's plenty of organizations that I've known and work with that, going into, they may be a $10 or $12 million annual operation, but it comes from, two sources, right? And one of them's the government, or,
or a big drive they do once a year, a big camp,
or a drive, yeah.
thing.
And so what happens is when the pandemic hit, that really exposed the weakness of, you earn, I know one organization that only fundraised through events.
I know a lot
right?
Here in New Zealand.
They were apoplectic about what they were going to do next, right? And so, the successful organizations that I've seen have taken the things that were working before and really just leaned into those and tried a whole bunch of new stuff, right? The idea of creating revenue streams both in the earned income and non-earned income, so the donations and non-income earned income. I have actually a client that I'm working with that was used to before the pandemic. They did great programs that they did for free. They got funding and they did these programs for free. And when the pandemic hit, their funding sources kind of dried up, and so they were really they had no idea what to do. But we went through a process of what are the things we could change, and we figured out that we could take that exact same product or service that they were offering and just change who their consumer was, who their market was. So they were used to direct delivery to families and kids. They turned it around and sold it. It's a D&I workshop. They turned around and did and sold it to corporations at 10 grand a pop, and all of a sudden they've got a brand new income stream. Same product. They don't have to change anything except who they were selling to.
Yeah.
Right. So that's an idea. Was a simple pivot that gave them immediate revenue, coming in and an easy early win, right?
Yeah.
For them. The idea of having a diverse revenue stream has really come through in the pandemic. Those who knew have been reminded and are shoring up that revenue stream. So, earned income, grants, contracts with for-profit and foundations, all those things coming together in looking at, okay, if we, in fact, I know one organization that's talking about, we don't want more than 25% in any one revenue stream.
Yeah.
Right. And so they're putting some limits on themselves to keep them honest and that's painful because some of those areas aren't ready to be 25% of their total. Revenue.
They're not. But what you're alluding to is this whole idea of, one, brave leadership that understands their short-term, in the short term what they need to do, but they have a long-term lens, and very much, I suppose, because we all heard it before COVID, but now I think everyone believes it a little bit more, which is that the pace of change is only accelerated. And what that means is, technology is evolving faster, consumers' behavior and our customer behavior changes quicker, or they can access things easier. But it also means that, in a sense, that our ability to execute, our ability to think through what's working, even that needs to have this lens of, because the landscape we play in is constantly changing. We shouldn't assume that what was going to work yesterday is working today. And so it's a challenge for us as humans to even work in that environment.
Yeah, and you're pointing out just a brilliant observation in the if you look at the structure of the boardroom and in the structure of a chart of work for a year, it's a very specific. There's a very specific planning window, and then it's oversight. And what has to happen is that has to get interrupted, and we have to, plan, review. So it changes everything, even down to the board meeting itself.
Yep.
How much time are we spending on, looking outward? This can't be, and just every time you do a strategic plan, you kind of gather some data. It's a constant, and more granular collection of data.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think, because I find this even with marketers, I run performance programs around campaign execution. And the one thing that I see that people don't do well, and I see this across businesses, is what the metrics that we're going to judge in advance that tell us success, they're not well defined. So it's people have fallen into what they've always done, which might be an email open or visitors to a site, but that real detail around what is the when we think OKR framework, outcomes, objectives and key results, really thinking through success measures that really matter and getting really clear on that, and then your it doesn't matter which activity you do. We're not so tethered to the activity. It's which activity is getting us there, and therefore we can let that one go because this one's better, versus I'm tethered to the activity and that's the thing that is what I want to keep holding on to, versus it actually only matters what outcomes I achieve. And so I'm sure you've seen that where people, that's why they struggle. I mean, because I suppose what we're trying to say is, why do people struggle to try something new or to let go of something? And I have a belief, part of that is only because sometimes something's been working, or it was my idea, or whatever. We want to hold on to the activity, the output, versus we should let go of that and be more focused on outcomes.
Right. Well, I have a perfect example of kind of an aha I had during one of my, I was the executive vice president at the YMCA of the Foothills. And one of the things that we did a lot of swim lessons, right? And so the thing we measured was how many registrations for each class we had, which doesn't tell me anything about the effectiveness, like how many kids actually learn how to swim.
How to swim.
Right. That's
and we'd rather have 5 kids learn to swim than 20 kids in the pool, but nobody learning to swim.
So we weren't even set up for that. What we were doing was measuring what was easily reported. Right. And it's a quick thing to make us feel good because it's an easy we can watch it. Sure. So we had to change the whole way, we collected the data, instead of just running a report out of our CRM, we had to actually, have folks in the pool area were certifying that, this kid can, define what does that mean actually swim, and then be able to start to count there. That shifted, by the way, our whole ability to raise funds. We were now raising funds to save lives, and being able to communicate quite clearly to a donor how much it actually costs and how long it took for an average kid to learn how to swim, right? It just laser focused that message and made it really specific. So we had much more participation in our fundraising when we could shift it and just not say, hey, we're doing good work, we do swim lessons and basketball and all this. We could say, look at what this is. This is actually preventing drowning.
And I love that for so many reasons. I mean, one, clearly because it's focusing on the thing that does matter, but it sets up expectations so people aren't saying, what are the registrations? Because managers say that and the staff think, well, that's all I should worry about. So it drives the wrong behavior and focus. But also expectations that maybe it is a longer game. So we understand this outcome requires more steps versus registrations, which is this linear thinking.
Sure.
So I suppose I can't help but think it's so easy for us sometimes to share examples after the fact that have worked well. And so you and I have talked about, people want to do better, but they don't know how to do better. I mean, it's this whole how. And I've heard you say, which I really like, that, people don't know the how, then it becomes a no or a dead stop because
absolutely
it's overwhelming. We are trying to solve sometimes quite complex problems because of the ecosystems we work in. So what would you share in that regard when we talk about what do people do differently? What is the how for them?
Sure. So I think that the step before, showing a how is to have the focus shift from the possibility of being certain and to let go of that. And with nonprofits, we have a great tool. It's our vision statement. So I've seen some really fantastic leaders really grab that vision statement, which is a future, a statement about what the world will be when we're successful. Yeah. And it serves then as that North Star to say, we don't know, that this is going to come in Q4 of 2050. We just know this is going to happen if we keep doing this work, right? And so it helps shift the board's mindset to, letting go of that need for certainty and saying, okay, that's the direction we go. We're going in that direction, and it's not exact, but it's I know it's
good enough.
Not the
It's
wrong
good.
direction, right? So that gets them. And I'm a big fan of Peter Block, and he wrote a book called the answer to how is yes. And so it's just, let's just relax. Nothing's bad's going to happen if we try this thing, and if it doesn't work, we're going to try something else. But we're always going to have our eyes on that vision of what the future is going to be. And that's what's going to guide us, instead of the numbers on the strategic plan or the annual plan or the budget.
Yeah. Can I ask you then, in the sense that, because I do believe leaders need to change from having the answers to creating the ecosystem for people to submit answers to your point, encouraging yes, does that then also mean that the solutions that put on the table are easier to be able to have others contribute? And when we talk about inclusiveness, diversity in the workplace, all those things that matter, therefore we get other solutions that a board might not have thought of, because they're only a collective of 5 to 10 people. So right. Is that also, do you think, not just the fact that the board's role is to make sure they're heading in the right direction, but that they let go of always being the solution, because they divulge it to more people, which means more solutions and more trying? It's there an element, do you think, of that?
Absolutely. I think, in that gathering of ideas, in that generating, whether it's novel ideas or innovation or whatever you want to call it, the more people you have doing it, the better. And I've seen a colleague of mine ran a hackathon for his nonprofit that included the board and the staff, right? And this is frontline staff. So these are 22-year-old kids with, sitting around on teams with board members. And it really helped, kind of get everybody aligned, but it also created ideas that I don't think would have been there.
Yeah.
Otherwise. I think the other thing, we talked about changing structures of board meetings. This really is a call to have space in every board meeting for generative discussion about the future. It can no longer be, I haven't opened my board packet. I have no idea what's going on, but I know that I'm going to be asked to vote on a couple of things, and a bunch of people are going to report, right? But I'm not going to be asked to participate in any way. So shifting that up and looking at, intentionally looking at the talents that you have assembled. And this goes back to I've heard executive directors say, well, I don't like the group I have assembled. It's like, okay, well, you better change that, right? They're not forward thinking. Well, what does that tell you? That's your board. Go get forward thinkers, right? So every question leads to more work. Right. But it's necessary work. And I think at the end of the day, it's work that the community will benefit from. Yeah.
So great. So I'd ask you that question about how you'd said, well, first of all, we've got to make sure that you're more focused on the vision and keeping heading in the right direction with outcomes. Let's wrap up. What do you think? Not-for-profits, particularly we're talking legacy-based not-for-profits that are struggling to let go. They've been in firefighting mode. They want to have certainty on execution. What are a couple of key things you'd be saying if that you think they need to hear today or they need to embrace, even if we've covered it? Let's.
Yeah, I think again fostering an environment of experimentation and rapid experimentation, I think it is important, because they will find what really hits both the client and the funder, you'll find that sweet spot, and you won't find it if you spend 3 years developing this perfect program, right? It has to be rapid fire, yeah. And it doesn't have to be.
And just for those that don't know, because I come across people that don't know how to do experiments, so there are frameworks, there are tools.
Oh, yeah.
If people don't know, design sprints, agile, there are different types of sprints that can help, or even testing formats. There are ways and processes that can guide people to experiment, so they don't just have to
Yeah, they don't have to make it up.
There are, just in case people don't know, because I think that
Agile,
helps people.
Even the Reinvention Stellar model will help.
The Stellar framework is fantastic for giving you the vision at the, keeping your eye on the end game, and then understanding your, Stellar's fantastic.
Yeah. So there's none of this stuff are we talking about where there's not tools that are available. It's just in the nonprofit sector, they've never needed them before. Right. Yeah. So it's kind of a search for new tools and to help provide those tools and kind of the skills to use them. I think the other thing I think that is vitally important is to be able to start to look at the structure that your organization has built up over the years, and in legacy organizations, it's kind of calcified, and to really look at what does this system support and what does it keep us from doing.
Great question.
I know a lot of 2 or 3 of my clients have moved to outsourcing their entire CFO department. Right? They don't have any in-house accounting anymore. Right? So they were able, and they saved a bit of money. That they found that wasn't core to what they did. They needed to stay nimble and not have that big of a employee footprint, or however they want to talk about it. But that's just what is calcified in the organization, and how is it keeping you from trying something new?
And so what you're sort of saying there is when you start that process, there are no questions that can't be asked, because it doesn't mean that people are saying they want to do it. But for some people, like saying we should outsource the CFO, it's not people saying we should do it. It's better to say I loved it. What are we doing right now that's holding us back from what we could be doing,
right?
Or should be doing? And so then you should go really broad with all of that, and then you can make choices in a wise way. But there is nothing that shouldn't get on the table to start with, because I like that exercise of yes and. As soon as we say no, the brain shuts down its thinking. So we have to keep all the thinking going, so the brain keeps contributing and it gets in the zone. That's how we get lots of contribution on the table to start with from everybody in the room.
Right. Yeah. And that's the art of the leader, is creating that environment that is safe, has low risk, is playful, and allows people to see that this is not, these are just questions, right?
Yeah, and we're not making decisions. We're
asking questions.
We're looking through the landscape.
And even if there's a question that's earth shattering, it's okay to say, wow, we're not equipped to deal with that, right?
Yeah. That for us, because I think having conscious awareness of what's triggering us is actually also important, because that's a clue to maybe what we're holding on to, that maybe therefore emotionally we're making poor decisions because it triggers us, or poor insight. Yep. So experimenting, like letting go of that certainty and doing some really rapid fire experimentation, really looking at what your organizational structure is and whether it's really serving you. I think that how many titles or roles then get you focused in a direction that might not be helping. And what else then, as a final takeaway, do you think are not-for-profits who want to survive for the next 50 years, because we know organizations are dying within 2 to 3 year periods right now?
Sure. Yeah. Well, they have to be willing to reinvent something, right? They have to be in the regular mode of anticipating change, designing change, and implementing that change, right? And we mentioned before earlier that nonprofits are really the weakest in anticipating change. There are very few organizations that look far enough out or with enough breadth to really understand what's going on in their community, and so they're commonly caught off guard.
Yeah.
And that that requires them to make decisions that maybe they wouldn't have to make, or quicker than they would, than a well thought through process could get them probably a different answer than what do we have to do today.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Wow. Damon, thank you. Great. We could talk for ages because you've got great insights. But I think the point is when we think about our desire to serve our communities, the people that organisations we want to see, not just survive, but survive well and continue to do the work they do and make a difference. Thank you for the fact that you continue to want to contribute and help elevate the work that your clients do particularly the not-for-profit sector. I always do pro bono work. I'm on a volunteer committee for the Marketing Association for Not-for-Profits. I chair that committee because I can see across the way a new SaaS tech startup in the not-for-profit space in the building I'm in. They're doing awesome work, and I agree with what you said right at the start. Government plays a role, but there is a place that not-for-profits will do better and need to do. And so if we can help them and help those people that are in those organisations that want to do well, they're there because they like to help. So help them help other people even better with what they've got, the resources they have. So thank you for the work and thank you for the conversation.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. I'll talk with you anytime. This is fun.